Okay, good morning, Facebook. So today's going to be a bit of a different kind of a broadcast. Frankly, because I'm just pissed off today. Uh, all right, we going? This Facebook live stream page is continually and unrelentingly confusing sometimes. As in, I can't tell how things are going, how things are sounding, or if it's even working. I've experienced problems with live stream before, but hey, maybe I'm going to switch this over to YouTube at some point. Who knows? Anyway, today is April 24th, Friday, April 24th, 2020. The time is 10:46 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So let's just get the grim figures out of the way. According to worldometers.info slash coronavirus, the world has experienced 2,767,917 positive or confirmed cases of COVID 19, resulting in some 193,858 deaths. This, according to worldometers.info slash coronavirus. This is the same info that is used when making the policy decisions that have resulted in these mitigation efforts, in the shelter in place and stay home orders that many states are dealing with, and some of which, by the way, are beginning to resist, including the most obvious and the most prominent one in the news media being Governor Kemp of Georgia, making the decision that he wants to open or allow certain businesses to open. Again, the governor's not going out there in Georgia and saying, okay, this business over here, you are required to open. And neither is the president. No one is doing this, but it's being reacted to in the media as though that is what is taking place. In defiance of a shelter in place and mitigation mandate issued according to the numbers that I'm reading out here every day. But we have more and more news emerging to call into severe question the reliability and the accuracy of these numbers. But more on that in just a second. So again, 2.7 million, almost 2.8 million cases and almost 200,000 deaths worldwide. So let's be specific country by country. The United States, 893,950 positive or confirmed cases. The United States has now surpassed 50,000. We're at 50,916. Nearly 51,000 American citizens have lost their lives out of, again, a reported 893,950 cases. I did a little bit of number crunching. That percentage, the 50,916 out of 893,000, that's 5.7%. 5.7% is the mortality rate according to these numbers in the United States. In second place is Spain. They're reporting 219,764 positive or confirmed cases, 22,524 fatalities in Spain. That brings their mortality rate, again, if these numbers are to be believed, to 10.2%. Italy, 189,973 cases with 25,549 fatalities. So they are still, no, they're no longer in first place for percentage. It looks like their percentage mortality rate is 13.4%. The United Kingdom remains the highest in the world. Their mortality rate is coming in at 13.6%. Reporting 19,506 fatalities out of 143,464 positive or confirmed cases. But there were so many stories in the news weeks ago about why does Italy have such a high mortality rate? And they went on to say, well, it's the demographics. There's a lot more elderly people. There's difference in the testing. There was a number of factors which I went through at length to try to make sense of why Italy was doing so badly. Now here, the United Kingdom, arguably the closest ally of the United States, is reporting a figure higher than that. The United Kingdom, according to these numbers, is leading the world in mortality rate within coronavirus. But you don't see that reported. The only reason I'm even talking about it is because I sat here with a calculator and just did some simple division. But we don't see that being reported. What we're seeing from the United Kingdom is that Boris Johnson was hospitalized and then was in the intensive care unit and then was out of the intensive care unit and now is doing better. And there was one question at the coronavirus task force press briefing yesterday about whether the president had spoken to Premier Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom. So, okay, let's just look at the United States a little more closely. New York State is now reporting 268,581 positive or confirmed cases and a death toll of 21,283. Washington State, I didn't bother counting where we were in terms of rank, probably around 13th or 14th place. That's where the state's been for some time. Washington State is reporting 12,753, and we are now currently reporting 711 fatalities in the state of Washington. Nebraska is coming in at 2,124 cases with 47 fatalities. Right next door to Nebraska in Iowa, where I spent considerable time while I was living in the Midwest. 4,445 positive or confirmed cases, and Iowa has lost 107 lives to the disease. Now, I've been talking a lot about the unreliability of these numbers. I talked at great length yesterday about how there seems to only be one acceptable way to view this. And if you question it, then you can expect a backlash directed at you personally. And we're seeing that all over the news. And I think that in social situations where you have friends sitting around talking about it, one must be careful when questioning these figures. It seems like if you talk about it in any way other than to agree that this is the Black Plague making a second coming and that we have to keep everything locked down for as long as possible, otherwise you're a science denier and you want people to die. That's the attitude that especially a lot of elected officials are getting. And yet, I've already made reference to two studies in California, one in Santa Clara County, the other in Los Angeles County, both of which were conducting seroprevalence surveys, testing which identifies antibodies in blood serum. And the presence of a certain antibody establishes that the patient had contracted coronavirus, had recovered from it naturally, which, by the way, even according to these numbers, more than 98% of people who catch coronavirus do. They recover. They get better. In many cases, not even having been aware. Oh, yeah, but if you're asymptomatic, you might carry the virus and infect. Okay, more than 98% of people who catch it recover from it. And that's something that we almost never hear stated in the news. But the seroprevalence surveys indicate that the number of people who have caught this disease far exceeds, like by orders of magnitude, the number that's being reported by the CDC, by the Coronavirus Task Force, by the World Health Organization. The number of deaths, obviously, is not something that's subject to adjustment. But that's the numerator. The denominator is what is so vastly variable. But what it indicates solidly is that the number that would represent the mortality rate, the infection fatality rate, is way lower, like 0.1%, 0.1%. And two studies in the state of California, one in Santa Clara County, one in Los Angeles County, have both established that. And now there is a third one. This is from NPR.org yesterday afternoon. Coronavirus has infected a fifth of New York City, testing suggests. It was already clear that the coronavirus had and has the capacity to spread at an alarming rate. That, of course, is why states across the country implemented sweeping measures to slow the rate at which it was filling hospitals. But new numbers released Tuesday by New York, the state hardest hit, offered a startling glimpse of just how far the virus has spread so far. Based on the preliminary results of the first round of antibody testing conducted in New York, state officials estimate that 21.2% of New York City residents have contracted the coronavirus. Statewide, Governor Andrew Cuomo said an estimated 2.7 million residents have been infected. 2.7 million. Now, let me... Just that number looks familiar. It looks like I just read that out, doesn't it? 2.7 million. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because according to worldometers.info, the official number is that 2.76 million people worldwide have caught the disease. 2.76 million people worldwide, according to worldometers.info. And yet, Governor Cuomo of New York is now saying that these tests indicate that the same number of people in New York State alone have contracted the disease, most of whom ostensibly have recovered from it and have now developed antibodies. 3 separate studies, 2 in California, 1 in New York, all with the exact same result, that the number of people who've actually caught this disease and recovered from it is huge as the denominator in the fraction of those who've passed away versus those who caught the disease. So we're talking about 3 separate studies indicating, strongly suggesting that these lockdown measures were never necessary. 3 separate studies. And I guarantee you there will be more. Now, I mentioned earlier the coronavirus task force press conference, and I'm just going to dive right in with this. I have one other story I wanted to talk about, a Health and Human Services doctor who claims he was ousted for questioning hydroxychloroquine. People have just been pouncing all over the president because of his nearly month-old suggestion that the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin might be efficacious in treating those who catch this disease. And apparently somebody's been pushed out of his job, and the media is just jumping all over themselves to make it look like the only reason he did that is because he questioned the president's suggestion. But I'm going to broom that for just a second because I just can't get over the story that I'm about to get into. I'm sure anybody who's been watching the news is already familiar with this. So I watched the press briefing yesterday. All right. Now, the president had a team of medical experts come out and make a presentation about various things which have now been shown to be very effective in combating the virus. We're talking about ultraviolet light, sunlight. We're also talking about disinfectants in the way that they are effective in killing the virus on surfaces. I'm just going to read directly from the transcript of the press availability. So, this is the statement by the doctor, unfortunately, whose name... it was Acting Undersecretary Brian. And I'm just going to jump into the middle of what he said. And while that comes up, you'll see a number of some practical applications. For example, increasing the temperature and humidity of potentially contaminated indoor spaces appears to reduce the stability of the virus, and extra care may be warranted for dry environments that do not have exposure to solar light. We're also testing disinfectants readily available. We've tested bleach. We've tested isopropyl alcohol on the virus, specifically in saliva or in respiratory fluids. And I can tell you that bleach will kill the virus in 5 minutes. Isopropyl alcohol will kill the virus in 30 seconds, and that's with no manipulation, no rubbing, just spraying it on and letting it go. You rub it and it goes away even faster. We're also looking at other disinfectants, specifically looking at the COVID-19 virus in saliva. This is not the end of our work as we continue to characterize this virus and integrate our findings into practical applications to mitigate exposure and transmission. I'd like to thank the President and the Vice President for their ongoing support and leadership to the Department and for their work in addressing this pandemic. I would also like to thank the scientists, not only in S&T and the NBACC, but to the larger scientific and research and development community. Thank you very much. Okay, so that was the end of the statement made by Acting Undersecretary Bryan. The president, while Acting Undersecretary Bryan was standing at the podium making his presentation, the president was standing off to the side listening. Now, the president chimed in and said the following: "Thank you very much. So I asked Bill a question that probably some of you are thinking of if you're totally into that world, which I find to be very interesting. So suppose we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that it hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way, and I think you said you're going to test that too. It sounds interesting." And now, here comes the sentence which has dominated the headlines all throughout last night and into today. Right, and I see, this is the president speaking, right. And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets in the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it would be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors, but it sounds interesting to me. So we'll see. Okay. What has been the result of the president making that statement? Because I watched it in real time. And I remember furrowing my eyebrows a little bit, saying, "What, inject? What is he talking about, inject?" But this is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, in the news today. And I quote, "The president is asking people to inject Lysol into their lungs." And Mitch, and she's talking about Majority Leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, is saying that states should go bankrupt. The president is asking people to inject Lysol into their lungs? Now, look, I was watching the press conference in real time, and I was a little bit confused when the president made the statement, "Is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?" Now, I took that to mean that there's some kind of disinfectant which is safe for human consumption, which can be introduced into the respiratory system and clear the lungs of anything that might be killed by the type of disinfectant that a doctor might use. And I got the sense he was just sort of spitballing and just sort of riffing off the top of his head. If disinfectants have shown to be so effective against the virus on surfaces, on solid surfaces outside the body, then is there possibly a way that the same kind of treatment might be replicated in a safe way within the human body, especially in the lungs where this virus seems to do the most damage? That's what I got out of it, although I was also a little annoyed with the president standing there just riffing off the top of his head about something that really should be pontificated on by medical professionals, doctors, etc. So I just said, okay, he's out of his field here, but I never for 1 second took it to mean that the president was standing at the White House telling the American people to inject Lysol. And here is the Speaker of the House of Representatives going around saying that the president has said that he wants people to inject I can't even. And it's not just the Speaker of the House. The media has pounced all over this. Here is a sampling of headlines. Trump comments prompt doctors and Lysol to warn against injecting disinfectants. Media erupts over Trump comments on disinfectant and sunlight. Trump suggests injection of disinfectant to beat coronavirus and clean the lungs. White House issues revised transcript to show Burke said sunlight not a treatment for coronavirus. The White House curious benchmark for coronavirus success keep changing. Lysol maker warns against internal use for disinfectants. Trump floats treating coronavirus patients with light and disinfectants. Quack in chief sees injected bleach and tanning as COVID cures. That's probably my favorite one. Quack in chief sees injected bleach and tanning as COVID cures. I mean, there is very likely a very well-informed and very ideologically sound alternative to the style of governance and the policies of President Donald Trump. And I've been on the fence about that all along. And I've been eager, I've been hungry for some cogent articulation of alternative policies and an alternative ideology for governing the United States than what we've currently got. But instead of getting that, instead of satiating that hunger, I watch with my own eyes and listen with my own ears the president in the White House press briefing room yesterday. I heard what he said. And now, all over the news, all over social media, all over Facebook, the president wants people to inject Lysol into themselves. Is that the best you've got? Really? Do you really think anybody truly believes that that's what the president wants people to do? Now, I know that there was somebody in Arizona who heard the president use the word chloroquine, and they said, hey, wait a minute, we've got something over next to our fish tank called chloroquine phosphate. Maybe this will keep us from getting the disease. So they take a teaspoon of it and one of them dies. The president was blamed for that too. If this is the best you got in articulating a policy difference between yourself and the current occupant of the Oval Office, it shows that you don't have much to work with. It shows you don't have anything to work with. And it shows that there's very little that you won't do to articulate your hatred for the president. And if you think hating the right person strongly enough is enough to get you elected into office, then you have no political future. We need answers. And we need a viable alternate vision, not this. This is ridiculous. So yeah, it's just, I'm fit to be tied over things like this. No one actually thinks that injecting Lysol is a way to combat this disease. No one. And to report in the news media to the contrary is beyond irresponsible. That's going to be it for today. Thanks for listening. Be good to each other.